Dr. Joe Kavolus. What's up, man? Good evening. Thank you
Yeah.
for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Sam. Good to be here.
What's a typical day like for you right now, man? I know you got a lot of young ones running around.
Yeah. Yeah. It's variable. Depends on how much the girls wake up in the middle of the night. I got a 3-year-old and a 6-month-old. So like last night, 6-month-old, she has a cough or an ear infection or something. So she was up a good bit. But luckily the wife was helping out. And then I woke up at like 6:15, get ready, get in the car, meet my first patient in the pre-op area about 7, and then I operated today from 7:30 to 4:30.
Dang.
Came home, made dinner, and then I'm joining you. I put the
What's
girls down.
what's the average? I know you do like a lot of hips and knees and other joints possibly, but what's like the average time you spend with a patient during surgery?
So it totally depends on the complexity, but I'd say 2 hours. But the whole, like, for a standard hip or knee replacement, the whole process for the patient's probably more like 5 or 6, between like checking in, anesthesia, getting, they go into the OR, they've got to get the anesthetic, then we got to position them, then you like clean their skin, get them draped out. Then my part, then like the intense, what people think of, like the actual from incision to closure, that's probably like the 90 to 2 hour period. But then there's like, then there's all the cleanup. So it's funny. It's hard to quantify, but
Yeah, it's wild. You're right. I always think about like the incision, cutting open, sewing up, that sort of stuff.
I mean, yeah,
Uh,
that's definitely the most intense, but people don't realize, like, all the other stuff before and after is equally as important. I mean, like, that's that's the setup, right? That's the foundation for all the
Definitely.
other stuff.
Obviously, those 2 hours are extremely important, but we're going to get into a lot of like what's important before and after. But I want to know about you, man. You grew up, you're the oldest of a bunch of brothers. What was life like for you growing up?
I mean, it was always fun, always something going on in the house. Yeah, I was the oldest. There's 5 of us. A lot of sports, a lot of roughhousing. Our mom's a saint, I'd say.
Right.
Yeah, she's a total saint. And then, I got into what I got into because my dad did it. So that was kind of fun to watch. And he
That was
always
gonna be my
enjoyed it.
next question. Like with your pops, were you watching him growing up, being like pretty early on? That's kind of what you want to get into.
Yeah, I think I went and watched him operate with his mentor when I was 12. And I think that like kind of snagged me and it kind of put me on the path. And then, as you grow older, you kind of get some other ideas with some stuff. In undergrad for a while, maybe I thought I wanted to go into finance. Then for various reasons, I decided that wasn't what I was interested in. And then when I got into med school, like I looked pretty hard at neurosurgery too. But just came back to orthopedics. I was really fortunate that my parents, both my mom and my dad, would go to Nicaragua and Guatemala and do surgeries for really, like unfortunate and like really bad pathology, stuff that you just wouldn't see much in the States. And I got to go with him on that. And that kind of really rubbed me back into the orthopedic thing, watching those people go. It was called Operation Walk. And you literally
I
have
remember
people in a
that.
wheelchair.
Y'all, yeah, I mean,
Yeah. Yeah, you have people who are wheelchair bound and they walk out afterwards. And they don't speak a lick of English. And that was super rewarding just to see how, gratifying that was. So that's probably what pulled me back in the most.
was that could you spend a year at Clemson, right?
Two.
2 years.
Mhm.
What was did you have a vision that you always wanted to end up in Harvard for undergrad?
No, actually, I mean, you'll laugh, but frankly, it was our mutual friend, Julia Deason,
Nice.
who I went and visited her when I was a freshman, when I was at Clemson for like a weekend. And honestly, it was just like some of the conversations that I had and like, the difference, it's not the classes or anything. It was mostly the difference of like roommates, like the experiences, like listening to what people were talking about at like the dining hall tables and what they're into, that really kind of piqued my interest in a place like that. And then I applied to move schools after from Clemson for whatever, just because I felt like I needed to see a little something else. Been in the South a long time. And
No,
and
those feelings. Yeah.
Yeah, she was pretty adamant. She's like, if you're gonna apply, like, I really want you to apply here. So I did, and then I got in. And it's kind of hard to say no to Harvard. So went up there for the last 2 years of undergrad. That was great.
Were you thinking about finance then?
Yeah, that was when I like kind of got a little bit more of an interest in it. Obviously, because that's what the majority of kids that go out of there, they do that or they do consulting. And now a lot of them also go into like Facebook or Google or whatever. That's kind of like the path of least resistance from those schools. But obviously there's a ton of people there that also go into medicine or dental or whatever. But that was where I kind of like, I thought about it. And it just didn't really pan out for whatever reason. I mean, it honestly too, like, let's be honest, I graduated in 2008. That's like the right at the start of the financial crisis. And I actually was like, had a buddy who really wanted me to interview with Lehman Brothers, and like, thank God I didn't do that because I've been fired 6 months after graduating. Or not fired.
That Alex or somebody? Yeah.
No, it wasn't Paris a little longer than me. It was actually like a guy who was above me, and he's like, oh, I'm gonna go work for Lehman Brothers. This was 2006. He's like, you need to like meet my boss, get you a job, blah blah blah. You know, that's the way a lot of this stuff works too, right? As long as you're like a fairly competent guy. And you know, it's like, again, I was like hemming and hawing, but really, it's like, retrospect, I was really lucky I didn't, because you know, they all like the company collapsed. So.
Dude, you would have been walking out with a cardboard box and now your stuff in your hands, like you see.
Exactly right.
With med school, what was the conversation like with your pops? I bet he was kind of excited when he heard you were going to go that route.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we'd kind of known that was like in the cards for like, you know, probably through high school. Thought I wanted to do it. Like we said, I had that little dalliance with finance in undergrad, and then I went back. And he was always behind the scenes, incredibly excited about it, but he never put any pressure about like which field of medicine I was going to go into or anything like that. But you know, I mean, he did, like, obviously he brought me on the trips, and I think he was excited when the stars aligned, and I kind of went into the same thing.
What was the draw to neurosurgery?
I was really into philosophy in undergrad, and I thought that maybe that would be like a really, you know, it's kind of like, it's where consciousness is. I don't know.
It's crazy. I'm thinking about.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, we're just not that advanced yet. And neurosurgery, you can either do spine, which is like, you know, part of orthopedics too. There's two ways to be a spine surgeon. You can do orthopedic residency, or you can be a neurosurgeon. Pros and cons probably to going either one. I think, you know, the neurosurgeons will say they're better spine surgeons. Anyway, that's a whole other conversation. But regardless, you can do that, and those patients do pretty well. But then the people that actually operate on the brain just doesn't heal so well. And so I actually went to in between my first and second year of med school, I went to Tanzania and worked for a non-government organization that was trying to improve like trauma care in the neurosurgical arena throughout Tanzania, which is, you know, probably not the lowest hanging fruit, frankly. Like, it's a lot of resources, but it was still like really eye-opening. We actually got laughed at a lot when we told people why we were there, because obviously they're like, if you're going to spend all this money, why don't you just give out malaria nets? But regardless, I did that, and those patients, you could save their lives, but what they looked like afterwards was just not necessarily as rewarding as I think what it is in orthopedics. What I really like about the field is, you know, by and large, you're getting people back to a really high quality of life, right? Like,
dang, that's a good point.
Yeah, like that's what I like about. Honestly, it's probably one of the bigger flaws, frankly, I think, in medicine. Like, in the last 30 or 40 years, we've done a really good job of extending people's lifespans, but what's the quality of that? Like, you know, from the age of like 80 to like, you know, 95 or whatever.
Yeah, totally.
We're keeping people alive, but I'm not necessarily, we're not maintaining their lifestyles. I'm not, you know, I mean, who am I to judge? But it's necessarily the life that anybody would choose to live necessarily. Whereas that's the great thing about what I do is I can take somebody who, you know, can't ski, can't golf, can't play tennis, pickleball, whatever, can't run, and you can get them back to that activity. You can do it you can do it, you know, I have patients that, again, the majority of my patients are probably 55 up, but, you know, I've got patients in the 40s who will get back to high level activities, and, you know, that's really rewarding. So that's how I end up kind of settling on what I do.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, you can actually like see your results right away, which is super rewarding.
Yeah. The other nice thing too is unlike, God bless a lot of the other doctors that deal with chronic disease, because that's just really frustrating. Like you're just maintaining or you're trying to prevent it from getting worse. And also you've got to ask the patients to do things that it's kind of hard to get them to invest in, right? Like somebody who's working on weight loss, you know what I mean? Like you got to work on behavioral aspects and all sorts of stuff. Whereas you come into me and I can look at an x-ray and be like, yep, you've got arthritis, and I can fix that pretty quick. And obviously I exhaust all non-operative interventions prior to like resorting to surgery, but I always have in the back pocket like a really pretty, phenomenally successful treatment for these people. And that's great versus like I was saying, if you're a diabetes doctor, like, they're doing what they do honestly on a day-to-day basis. It's just much more, I think for me, it would be much more exhausting. Maybe not the stress of it, right? The stress of surgery is unique, but you don't get as many wins.
Yeah. What about are there lifestyle things that individuals do that you can kind of like see and tell early on that could lead them to like a hip or knee?
Yeah. So I would say that's a great question. I would say, so hip arthritis is, we don't know, but I would say it's like 90% genetic, honestly. So there's two different morphology spectrums. The hip's just a ball and a socket joint, and there's a spectrum. You can either be what's called dysplastic, where essentially your cup is more like a dinner plate, or you can have impingement, where essentially your cup's too deep. And it's a bell curve, right? Everybody falls in the spectrum. And it's a little genetic, and it's also a little bit environmental. Like that's why we don't swaddle babies' legs anymore, because that caused a lot of dysplasia, because the hip joints weren't going in to form it. But needless to say, between those two things, like depending on where you fall in that spectrum, that probably dictates whether or not you're going to get arthritis. And then we're not, of course, not talking about people that have like inflammatory problems like rheumatoid or lupus. So hips, 90% that, and then I would say the other 10%, maybe 8%, and then 2%, I don't know. Or, I'm making these numbers up, but the other 10% is probably like trauma. So like if you're young and you have like a little fracture, there's certain other things that can happen. You get an accident, or you have a sports injury that can also predispose you. Knees, on the other hand, definitely has some component of that, but knees are incredibly, like your knee can experience 4 to 8 times your body weight. So if you're like,
that's crazy.
If you're a big person, I would say you're gonna have knee problems at some point. It's almost guaranteed, kind of like low back problems. Whereas your hips might be fine if you're a big person, right? And then what's interesting about that too is you have patients come in, somebody's got terrible hip arthritis. You can change that joint. You do that surgery, you can change that person's life. Like I said, I've taken people from wheelchair bound to not. It's just like unbelievably rewarding. And you're not going to make them better. The bad thing about the hip is it's hard to make it better with any of the conservative things. You could try them, but they don't work so great. The knee, if you take a patient who's got really bad knee arthritis, like maybe mild knee arthritis, younger, and they're overweight, you have them lose weight. I've had people who have been like, I don't want to do your surgery yet. Like, try losing 50 pounds for me. Go, like right now it's like, go get on Wegovy, go get on Ozempic.
Yeah.
Your nutritionist, whatever you got to do. And then they'll come back and they're like, doc, my knees don't bother me anymore. Thank you. And then I'll be like, all right, come back. And, like it'll be 3 years before they come back in. And maybe then it's just for like a cortisone injection, or just to like get another look at the knees. Be like, how am I doing? So that's much more, the knee's much more environmentally dependent.
Gotcha.
If you had an ACL rupture too, you're going to be a little more predisposed and stuff like that.
What about just like being on your feet a lot and like playing a lot of sports? Does it wear down? Like, what is it like when it's bone to bone? You've worn out all year.
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question. I don't actually think we know, honestly. Paradoxically, when people ask, right, like arthritis, I tell them it's like wrinkles. Like it just gets worse with time, even if it's perfect. And like, I don't know if everybody knows what a meniscus is, but it's a bumper in between your two bones. By the time you've got bone on bone, that bumper's been extruded. But they've done, and it's degeneratively frayed and torn. They've done studies though. If you take an MRI, like everybody our age in their 30s, and nobody has any pain in your knee, 30% of us are going to have like some changes to the meniscus, like even if you don't have any issue. And so the only way to mitigate that progression is actually stay skinny, like we were talking about, and then stay active. And so there's no good answer to what you were just asking. Like, actually being more active is better because you're fit, you're skinnier, your muscles are stronger, they add more stability. You're not relying as much on those innate structures in your knee. Your muscles are able to actually balance
Mm-hmm.
it and decompress it some. But then at the same time, if you're very active and you get an injury or like, have a repetitive use injury, yeah, that might predispose you, but it's almost impossible. Like I'll have people come in and they're like, oh, I'm a marathon runner, I did this. And then I'll have other patients who come in and are marathon runners or like ultra marathon runners, their knees look perfect. So
Yeah.
it's not necessarily that simple. And that's probably where it gets into some of that genetic stuff that we just don't have a good enough grasp on yet, combined with, you might have even maybe injured your knee in some really micro way that bothered you, and you took some Advil when you were 20, and that actually, honestly, that laid the foundation for you to have problems down the line. And I just don't think you have a good enough grasp on how that actually plays out.
Yeah, totally. And everybody's so different in their own ways. Like I've always thought like the more active you stay, really maybe the better off you'll be. But
I think that, well, I mean, I think we could probably, I'm pretty confident you can say that for sure. I mean,
definitely.
if you're going to the gym and you're working out, and as long as you got good form and you're not causing injuries to yourself, you're going to be better. I mean, like maintenance of muscle mass is incredibly important. Like they've done like for like longevity and living long times, there's a couple of interesting things. Like the faster people walk, the longer they live. And what that means is like relative to themselves. So like when people start to walk slower, they're like, that's a predictor that they're about to have a little bit of a decline health wise. And then, VO2 max, right, which is an indication of cardiopulmonary fitness. Like that's the other thing that'll predict longevity. Those two things.
Yeah, better. You see the blue zone people, man. It's like those people in those like hilly areas in like Italy and Greece, just walking all over the place.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, all the people live to be 100 live on like these huge inclines and walk up and down stairs all day.
Yeah, you see them like walking to church every day, and it's a freaking huge incline to get there. Exactly what are some of the other treatments? And you named a few of them, but other treatments before you might get to surgery.
Yeah, so the first and lowest like hanging fruit is actually physical fitness. So you come through my office, the way I'm probably going to have you do that is go to see a physical therapist. I will say, by and large, most Americans, it's probably just more modern life. I'm sure this is fairly common across the globe. Your quads are weak. You don't engage your glutes. You're a little overweight. And if we can kind of optimize that, get your weight under a little better control, really get you some more core strength, namely, again, your quads, your hamstrings, and your glutes. A lot of like early on things like that's for honestly, for kids, people our age, that's like probably the most important. And, cardio, everybody talks about cardio, but doing some strength training several times a week is probably the best. And it'll pay dividends. That's like kind of making an investment in the bank now for us when we're much older.
Yeah.
So that's where you start. Next step up is symptomatic treatment. And that's where, I have some people that come in and like, well, it only bothers me when I run like 10 miles. Mm-hmm. And so I'll say, well, first off, you could just, like not do that, but most people don't want to give that up. And then the next thing is, it's like, well, you can maybe take on as needed some occasional anti-inflammatories. And that's fine as long as they don't not need them every day. Next step after that is you could start to talk about some of the stuff that's a little bit more fringe. It's FDA approved, but insurance won't cover it. That's stem cells or the PRP biologics. What I'll tell you about that is there is huge, I think, potential for that. And they work, but not the way a lot of people on the internet like to espouse. So I think some unscrupulous people will tell you like, oh, it's going to heal your arthritis, or it's going to regrow tendons, or it's going to restore and rejuvenate. And it might, but the way I described it when I gave a talk on this one time was basically what we're doing is we're taking, like, if you want to bake a cake, right? It's like what we're doing right now is we're taking the ingredients, we're taking like flour, milk, sugar, butter, throwing it in the oven without any sequence, no like container, that's just, and like sometimes guess what, like it'll come out, you might produce some nice stuff, and that's how it works right now. So sometimes it'll work, and I think it's probably doing it because it produces some like It stimulates your body's own healing potential to some degree, or might quiet down some of the inflammation that's going on. But then we're not to the point yet where we've figured out the recipe in terms of the sequence, exactly what you need, how much of which of the different elements that we're actually doing when we deliver those stem cells, that PRP or whatever. But I do, again, for younger patients in particular, that can be actually pretty helpful. And that's coming off of also like people, they've done these studies where if you tear your ACL and you have a meniscus tear at the same time, there's a bunch of blood in your knee, those patients actually do better. The ones that bled into the knee, the meniscus is more likely to repair. And that's kind of, that's the way these things right now are working.
Got it.
And then the next step after that, at least from what I do a lot of, is you can do like pain management stuff. So that's injections of various things.
I know my dad started trying that, like injections first, but
yeah, I mean, and honestly, I think it's probably a good next step, because frankly, it's kind of the last one before surgery. And so if it can delay surgery a bit, that's probably in the best
totally.
interest.
Which might be interesting. I think and you mentioned like if you, to prevent a lot of these, it could be like your weight, it could just be like staying healthy. And a lot of that has to do with nutrition. But what I didn't realize was how important nutrition is, like leading into surgeries or some of these treatments. When was that like a light bulb for you?
Yeah. So it probably happened when I was during my orthopedic residency training at Duke. So right around this time, we started doing these things called value bundled care for surgery, which basically said that the insurer told the hospital that they were going to give them X dollars. And if patients had problems above and beyond, that would come out of those dollars.
Mm-hmm.
So interesting that when I was there at Duke, what they did was they went regressionally through the data, and then they had a bunch of cutoffs where they're like, patients are too high risk. So it was, and then in some of them were hard stops, and some of them we would send patients to tweak to get better. BMI was one of these. So, being overweight was one. Diabetes being poorly controlled is a huge one. So we'd send you to an endocrinologist. If your blood levels were low, we'd send you to a hematologist or an anemia workup to get tweaked. And then one that I noticed that we didn't do anything about, and I was like, why not, was all these nutrition markers.
Mm-hmm. Like blood work? Like blood work?
Yeah, you'd be blood. They would get a bunch of pre-op before surgery labs. It's like your basic blood levels, which, again, if those are low, we'll send you to the hematologist. We get your A1C, which is a 3-month look at what your diabetic control is like. And then they would do these nutritional like labs in addition to like your weight and your height for your BMI. And again, if those were below certain metrics, we would not me personally, but the hospital would do it. Actually, it's kind of upsetting to some of the surgeons, because you're telling me they were, it was taken out of their controls when they could do these patients.
Mm-hmm.
But it was interesting to me. I was like, this seems, it's astounding how many people actually had these nutritional problems. And then that we were just kind of like set them free, basically just saying, oh, work on your nutrition, come back when you feel like you've like made this better.
Yeah, that's tough for the patient.
Yeah, it's really tough. And especially some of these people, don't have the education, or they don't know exactly what the right thing to be doing, what their diet is. And so that was like one of the first time that I thought I was like, man, this is probably like a little bit of an unmet need. And then throughout the same time, we really got orthopedics in general. Most of the research was on infection prevention, infection management, and then also pre-optimization. So making patients as ready or robust for surgery as possible. And again, the pre-optimization was really focused more on these other medical things, not necessarily like something as day-to-day important as just nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
Interestingly, I would actually say the general surgeons are a little bit ahead of us in this regard, because they've been working with the bariatric, like with the weight loss patients. And so they institute something called the early enhanced recovery after surgery protocol. And part of this for them was patients get nutritional supplements before and after surgery. And so it stood to reason from my like thought process that why wouldn't we do this for orthopedics? And then my first job was at Tufts Medical Center in downtown Boston, and that serves a little bit of like a tale of two worlds. There's like, very affluent people in downtown Boston. There's also, it serves a little bit of the more disadvantaged community. And one thing that they found that they needed to do was they just gave everybody nutritional supplements that came to get surgery, because we took care of a lot of people, like, who just maybe didn't have the best home environment, the social setup. And it made, again, intuitive sense to me. And I was like, why wouldn't we be doing this? Why wouldn't everybody be doing this? And it was during this time, though, that the product that we were using
I was going to say, what was the product then?
Yeah, it was called Nestle. It's a Nestle. Like the behemoths in this area are Nestle and Sugar. And honestly, the behemoths, because they also supply like a lot of the other medical nutrition. So like there's like IV nutrition for people in the ICU or can't take orals or tube feeds. Like they're doing all that. And so this just was like kind of an add-on. But it was called Nestle Impact Factor. And it was a surgery-specific formulation that they were using for a lot of bariatric patients. And we started using it for our hip and knee and spine patients. But it tasted terrible. Like they had to freeze it. It was heavy. Like it came already mixed. But the problem with that was a lot of my patients were like complaining about how heavy it was. It was difficult when they gave it to them. They like didn't know how to get it back home. And like really, a lot of them were just like, I had to choke that thing down. It was awful. So around this time, I was like, and it also was lacking some of the other like aspects of things in nutrition that I thought were helpful. It was focused on mostly just, it was focused on one aspect of nutrition, namely the macronutrients, which, that's proteins, carbs, and fats. But micronutrients are incredibly important as well. And so essentially between the bad taste, it being a little bit cumbersome for the patients, and then the lack of like maybe some more refinement in terms of exactly what I wanted in the formulation, I kind of set out to find somebody to help me make something of my own. And luckily, after over a year of looking and just, having the right conversations, found somebody that was in the space, already doing this a lot, open to working with, entrepreneurs and startups. And so helped us come up with a product that tasted great and checked all the boxes in terms of what I was looking to have my patients take before surgery. And so out of that, we decided to found the company we called it Imtuitive, for short for immunologically intuitive, with nice. with the idea being that, it would make you, from a nutrition standpoint, it would bolster you to get you as ready as we can in a short period of time, right? For the amount of time that I basically got some access to influence your life, to get you ready for that surgical procedure. And, at the end of the day, it's one of these things where the biggest thing I think we should do right now is just, I'm not sure, like you were saying, I don't think anybody else really, it's not something that's, even though I think it's like kind of like intuitive, how do people not realize this? I mean, yeah, it's not something that I think a lot of people have thought about before. It's starting to get a little bit, more play in the press, and the literature's kind of like one of the hot topics right now. There's tons of level 1 studies, which means they're randomized, like placebo and non, in orthopedics, where we can show that patients have less muscle loss and their fractures heal better. They have less wound complications, less risk of an infection. They actually have less like major complications like heart attack and renal problems. So I think, the evidence is really there to support what we're doing. It's just, we got to get the word out that this is important for people to do. Yeah. And the other thing, like the way I think about it is, like I'm young and I don't think I'm malnourished, although I haven't given myself the blood test, but I'm pretty confident I'm not. My wife does a good job of making sure I get the right stuff in my body. But, I work out, I strength train several times a week. And after I do, I'm taking, Costco protein supplement. Right. And so people are going to surgery, and like, that's the most intense workout they're ever going to, physiologic stress they're ever going to experience. Yep. So why would they not be doing the same thing, and maybe just a little bit more of a specialized formulation at that same time?
I don't know the percentages, but the amount of people that don't know the proper nutrients they need on a daily basis is mind blowing to me. Like, even my best friends, they'll be asking me these questions. I'm like, you don't know this, man? Like, you need to be eating this amount of protein and this amount of water. Like, It's really, really important. With the risk, if somebody is not, they have poor nutrition going into a surgery, and this obviously goes into after surgery too, but what are some of the big risk factors?
Frankly, the biggest one is like a poor healing response. And what I mean into that is also the one, at least for me in orthopedics, probably for everybody, is infection. If you get infection, especially in what I do, so like or spine surgery, venous, or honestly, anything that's implantable, that's like if it's on a non-biologic surface, the infection, you can't just treat that with antibiotics. That's another trip to the OR. And then it's long-term antibiotics, and that's bad news. Honestly, people don't know this, but the mortality rate, if you get an infection in your hip or knee, like what I do, over 5 years is worse than all the most common cancers except for lung. So it's worse than breast, renal, GI, colon, all that stuff. So those are bad problems. And what I'll tell you is everybody likes to think I do so much stuff in the OR to prevent there being any bugs, but at the end of the day, we're never doing sterile surgery. It's always this race between the number of what we call them colony forming units. Basically, it's just like a fancy way to say number of bacterial cells in your immune system. So like you work out, you're healthy, you're well malnourished. You could probably, I'm going to make this number up, but you could probably handle like 10,000 bacteria in a wound, and your immune system would wipe it. But somebody who's older, frailer, has more like medical problems, most like diabetes, vascular disease, they're a smoker, and they're malnourished. That person, maybe they get 100 cells in their wound, they're going to get an infection.
Yeah.
So it's just this balance. So then you just, what you got to do before surgery is get people smoking less so their blood flow is better, get the diabetes optimized, and get their nutrition up so that their immune function is at a level that's going to allow them to get through that surgery safely.
With intuitive, you said the first idea popped in your head when you were in medical school. When was the first like product you got of your own?
Yeah, I think 2021 was when we first had the product in hand.
How long were you testing and trying to figure out the right mix of stuff?
2 years before that was like going through the ringer, trying to find the right producer and make sure that it would hit all the check boxes. And I mean, I'll tell you this right now, it'll probably forever be a little bit of a product in evolution. I think if we weren't updating ourselves as more comes to the forefront of knowledge and the literature, I don't think that we would be offering patients the type of product that we'd be proud to provide for people and have them take. But I think we're pretty happy with the formulation as it is. That being said, I do see the opportunity for tweaks or maybe add-ons and adjuncts, or you could change the duration, the course, and that sort of thing.
I mean, I think in that space, it always has to be a continuing process of changing and mixing with what it is. If somebody says they come into you, they have poor nutrition, like what would your suggestion be to them to take on a daily basis, or for how long? What is that?
Yeah. So that's a great question. So there's not any literature that's conclusive about the optimal dosing or duration. So then it's a little bit of what's pragmatic. It's like when are you going to get the patient, and when are they actually going to listen to you? And I'm a pretty practical guy. I like to think of myself as a realist. So I want to ask patients to do something that I actually think that they're going to follow through on.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, I don't screen people for malnutrition necessarily unless I'm worried about them. I just ask everybody to do this, to do the preoperative protein work. And then I don't want to be like, pushy about it, because I'm their doctor and this is a separate venture. So when they come through, it's actually my PA does a pre-op appointment, goes through a bunch of stuff. Honestly, a lot of it's like what to expect before surgery. We have them use special soaps 5 days before surgery. We ask you to change your sheets the night before surgery. A lot of it's, infection prevention based stuff. And then we also say, we really want you to supplement your nutrition. You're welcome to do that on your own if you've got like a good, protein supplement and some multivitamins you want to take. That being said, there's some vitamins that we ask you not to take before surgery because they thin your blood. So you got to be careful there. And then we also say, or, we've got this product that she'll say that Dr. Kavolus developed specifically for this, and you're welcome to have that, but, we don't want to force it upon any. The most important thing for me, honestly, at the end of the day, is I just want them to be taking in extra appropriate nutrients before surgery. And we ask them to do it for 5 days, because I just think that's pragmatically what people are most likely to do.
And honestly, I tell everybody, you got to find something sustainable. Like, you got to find something people are going to do.
Yeah. Because there's other, some of our competitors want to do it for 30 days before surgery. And first off, I'm not sure people are like that plugged into what they're going to be doing that 30 days before. And then I just think it's more likely that they might do it for the first week, 30 days out. And then the most important one's one right before. And they might just you might be sitting in the bottom of the pantry to that point, right? So, and I would say too, it's probably best if you did it before and after surgery, but between the two, I'd rather just have you bolused up with a great amount of baseline nutrition for when we actually take you to the OR.
And it's something I never thought about until you said it, but it's the most intense workout most people are going to have in their life, these types of surgeries.
Yeah, they've done some really cool studies on this in the orthopedic literature. Basically, your protein basal, which is just your baseline rate and necessity, can go up 60% from a major surgery, right? And most people, again, as you were saying, even our friends our age, aren't taking enough protein at baseline.
Yeah.
And then you're asking them, and then they're saying that you're already deficient from that baseline, and now we're going to add a 60% stressor. And because protein fundamentally at the end of the day, it's that's the building blocks for all the healing that's going to take place. Mm-hmm. And at present, what happens is your liver produces a bunch of extra glucagon, and does through gluconeogenesis, which basically just means it's making a bunch of fuel, but it does that by actually breaking down your muscle cells that you already got, unless you're taking it. And so that's, again, why it's really important to make sure that you're kind of topped up, the tank's full when you go in, so that you can preserve what all muscle mass that you've already got at present anyway. And so that's where you really get it. And that's what, again, allows for the wound healing.
Mm-hmm. It makes sense, dude.
Move system.
Yeah. With other use cases, outside of just surgery, how can this benefit people in other cases?
That's a great question. So, we thought about this a decent amount, and I would say the incidence of malnutrition for a bunch of things that are physiologically stressful is incredibly high. And so it's been well proven that, you go patients in the ICU, almost every single ICU patient comes out with a protein deficit and malnourished and vitamin D. Similar for patients who are obviously on chemotherapeutic regimens. If you're gonna do something like, we're interested in this, we haven't done any research on this, but I'm pretty inclined to think that anybody giving birth is probably going to be at a physiologic disadvantage if they're not supplementing. I think, honestly, if you have a major athletic injury, you probably need to be taking in some sort of supplement. Just make sure that you have the building blocks to heal yourself by not robbing Peter to pay Paul. Which, what I mean by that is you're not healing your torn ligament by depleting your muscle mass, because you're not taking in the extra nutrients that your body needs to manage that injury.
Yeah, I know with you, and you mentioned to me before we started recording, it was your goal, you just want your patients coming in to be healthy and have the best possible surgery and outcome for them. But for Imtuitive, what are your goals for it? Would you like to try and get it into hospitals, or how would you like to get more people really just aware of what they need to do?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing we could do for that is stuff like this, right? Just build some awareness. And then hopefully with awareness, people will realize that this is a product that has some good foundation and seems like it's, doing it for the right reasons. But at the same time, obviously we would love, as the business, it's a startup, we're a business, we'd love to grow. It'd be amazing to get some enterprise customers, aka hospitals or maybe a nursing home or something like that. But again, the problem is kind of like Ensure and Nestle. That's like going up against Microsoft.
Yeah, what I mean by that is barriers.
Yeah, well, what I mean by that is Intuitive. If you want to look at it this way, Intuitive is like Teams and Microsoft already, they give away Teams when the hospital buys Office for everybody, right?
Yeah.
I'm not joking. So it's like, it's tough. So like, cause like Intuitive's Teams, and then the hospital's buying Office, which is like their TP, like the IV nutrition, the tube feeds, all the other stuff that they have to have. So that's a huge barrier for us. So I
Do you know,
think
are those contracted in together?
that's what I'm saying. They are frequently
Yeah.
are, right? So it's like, if they'll they still make revenue on the sell of the same stuff, but what they'll say is oh, if you use our more like in hospital nutrient stuff, like the IV nutrition or the tube feeding stuff, if you buy us from that, we'll give you a break and like give you all the other stuff at a 50% rate. You know what I mean? Like that's just honestly, that's smart business, right? Like
tough to compete with that.
And that's how Amazon makes all their money, right? That's why it's tough to break in. The barrier to entry is high. Like they've got, scalability that we just don't have right now. So really too, we're hoping, honestly, I think our formulation's a little more nuanced. I think more specifically built for surgery, as opposed to kind of like an add-on to like, oh, we're a nutrition company and we've got this stuff.
This is your protein shake or something. Yeah.
Yeah. The protein shake and pudding. And again, it's got a bunch of I think what it separates us a little bit more is protein is the backbone of this. Don't get me wrong. Like if one takeaway, well, anybody listening, one takeaway is, if you have a family member or you having surgery, you should take Intuitive. But the real takeaway is, in bolus your nutrition, protein probably being the backbone of that. But we've got more micronutrients in there. Again, a couple more like specific vitamins and minerals that we think are important for wound healing, recovery, pain management, all that sort of stuff. So I think we're trying to hope that maybe we're a little bit more of a niche product, more of a higher end, product that people could reach out for. And also, honestly, our taste is like, you have to try it to believe it. But like the number of patients that I've come back and say like, oh my gosh, that was so much better than anything I've had before.
That makes really a big difference, dude.
Well, they'll actually take it.
Yeah, for real. And like, they'll take it long term and they won't dread it. What about like the easiest to use? Like, I know y'all wanted to kind of create a product where it was like pretty easy for the person.
Yeah. So there's two ways to think about it, right? Like, again, Nestle and Ensure pre-mixed, just open it, but it's heavy, it's cumbersome, and it tastes bad. Ours comes in pre-portioned packets. Basically, you either mix it with 4 ounces of water or 8 ounces, depending on the consistency. 4 ounces gets you early tasty pudding, and 8 ounces gets you like a little bit more of a shake. And we got, right now we have 2 flavors, vanilla and chocolate. I kind of feel like that covers everybody.
Yep. Give me that chocolate.
Yeah. We've had a couple people that want one of each. Fine, whatever, variances are, the spice of life. So, yeah, I think, pre-portion, we ask you to take, basically it's a add-on, right? So you don't use it instead of your meals. You add it on like you did before or after. We like to think of it kind of probably as like a little dessert that you take for the 5 days before. And again, obviously this product isn't for everybody. I'm sure somebody's not going to like the taste. I would say 9 out of 10, 99% of my patients rave about it. And they're like, that was kind of delightful. Like, I was like, oh, I liked it.
Do most of your patients buy it online?
No, so my office, I actually have just like a inventory. And so, that's for ease, right? My practice is nice that they've been supportive. And so patients want it, we'll just hand it to them that day. I know they get it, but but for a while we didn't have any vanilla. So if patients wanted vanilla, they go online. And there's various other people's too, who I guess they think about it and we have given them QR codes. And so yeah, we've had some online sales too. And that's, people can go to www.imtuitive.com.
Definitely. It'll be in the show notes too. With your career path, is this, I mean, obviously I know you're super passionate about what you do in the surgery room, but is this something that you kind of could see eventually being full time? Like what type of passion is this for you?
Yeah. I mean, I think the devil's always in the details of that sort of consideration. I'm not gonna lie. If I could get to the point where I could decrease clinical a little bit, it would be nice to have some variability. Yeah. So as to whether or not this would become full-time, hard to say. I mean, I do really like the clinical aspect. I like engaging with my patients. I like doing the surgeries. At a certain point too, though, you need to like what makes a good surgeon is doing a lot of it. So there'd be a point where I wouldn't feel comfortable, like if I wasn't staying sharp enough and on top of the game, that I would probably have to go one way or the other. But right now I would say, yeah, this really got some legs. I wouldn't mind dialing back clinically to focus on this, but you have to kind of just see where that takes us. Yeah, I'll admit that's probably a goal for sure.
Yeah, man. I mean, I think that's a great balance. Like, if you could figure out that balance, and we started off by talking about your brothers, man, and you and a brother, Steven, are kind of taking this on together. How did that synergy come about?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we've got like incredibly different skill sets, right? So, and I'll admit, it probably drives Steven a little nuts, but I'm busy clinically, so like he didn't realize, but some days he'll be texting me and like, OR, like literally I can't respond.
Yeah,
and the
hands are in a body.
Yeah, and then in the clinic, and then like as soon as I get out, I'm like doing paperwork, and then I go home and see the girls. Or in clinic, like I can respond, but you don't realize like when you're seeing a doctor, like it's like we're running between 30 micro meetings, like 30 or more, and so it's just there's really not much time. You barely have time to eat during those days. So he had a little bit more bandwidth on that front, and then also he's just got the capacity, right? Like I did some of the basic science aspects of this and like the theory behind it. Have like had some publications in some journals about this stuff, but then he does like I can't build a website. I don't know anything about marketing. I don't know anything about like making our logo. And so he's helping with some of the day-to-day operating, like he's the one that suggested, we do this, right? So so I think it's really nice because again, I think we have very complementary skills, and like where one of us is weak, the other one might be a little strong. And it's also, it's fun to be doing something with family.
Yeah, man. And you're right. I mean, I know both you guys, and I think like y'all are opposite in your own ways, but definitely can work together in the best ways. With you, man, you think you'll ever move back down south?
No, probably not.
Oh, John.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I got girls who are like kind of footed up here. My wife's family's up here, so I hope they get maybe like, if this does really well, I can have like a second house down there.
Yeah, man, you could spend the winters down here at least.
Yeah. Well, trust me, that's like a lot of my patients actually do that. They're like older and retired, and like they come up, they're up here for the summer, they'll like see me, and then they're like, I'm gonna go to Florida for like after Thanksgiving until May. Like, it must be nice.
Yeah, that's a great goal. My wife's family's from Michigan, and the aunt and uncle we spend a lot of time with, they're down in Naples right now, hanging out in Florida. So,
yeah, Naples, Sarasota, it's amazing. West Palm Beach is like those places, like their populations must swing wildly during the
for sure.
I'd say
it's like nobody there in the summer.
Yeah, you should come up here though. It's much nicer up here than it is in Greenville or the South Carolina from about June through October.
With it's much more tolerable, probably.
Yeah, well, there's like the humidity's lower. Yeah, you're not like, I was in med school in Charleston. You'd walk outside and you try to walk across. I'd literally walk across the street in August, and I feel like the pavement's trying to eat me. I have to change my shirt.
All right, last question. We talk about nutrition. You obviously grew up getting a lot of bomb meals from your mom. What's your favorite meal from homemade mama cooked?
Oh, that is on the spot. Oof. She makes, just her basic pot. So yeah, she's half Italian. Her pasta or pizza, and then like homemade salads, or like you get a combo of that. It's just hard to beat. Like the homemade pizza crust is just phenomenal. So I'd say, yeah, probably one of those. And then she also makes every once in a while, these special occasions, she makes some potato gnocchi. Yeah, so some on the Italian front with a homemade salad, which is, my mom's got a heavy saltan, but I like it, so that's like about as good.
Without a doubt. You and the family got any travels coming up?
Yeah, we're gonna go to Florida for a week to get out of the cold up here. Taking the girls. That'll be a learning experience to see how it does with a 3-year-old and a 6-month-old in one hotel room. But we'll see.
Have you I guess maybe because they're still too young, but you got any girl dad advice for? I got a bunch of friends with girls right now.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people I know have girls. They're different. Yeah, it's way different than boys. I feel like what I've realized is, like, I feel like with boys, you can be a little hard on them. I
Mhm.
don't think that don't work so well for girls. You gotta love them. You don't want to spoil them at the same time. Like, you got to set boundaries, but yeah, I would just say be supportive at all times is probably the best thing to do.
Without a doubt. And I'll tell you this, coming from an older sister, I think if you end up having another one, I don't know if you do or not, but if you have a boy, they will be like better prepared to be like nicer and better with girls as they
Oh,
grow up.
I feel bad for my wife all the time. She's like, she has to deal with me, and like I have no like emotional bandwidth. I'm pretty sure it's because I'm pretty confident it's because like we were raised in like a house of 6 men, and my poor mom, who's like basically like had to like morph into like male like behaviors. But I that what your point, my point being is like I 100% agree with you. That has to be true.
Yeah, without a doubt. Well, Dr. Joe, man, it's been a pleasure. I'm pumped to see y'all grow, and I think there's some really cool other opportunities outside of just like hospitals to get this product in. And I mean, the importance of nutrition is just so important in general, anyways, for people to understand. So the more education, the more intuitive is going to grow. I'm excited to see where it goes. Thank you for joining me. All the links will be in the show notes, but it was a pleasure having you on.
Yeah, Sam, I really appreciate the time, and it's been really cool to watch what this has become for you too, man. So
Thank you
congrats.
so much.
Yeah.
Great job.
All right. Bye, guys.